Hey everyone, this is James from TDB bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today I am going to be talking about the Spring of Menghai. It is a Dayi blend that they do pretty regularly, especially in this specific era. I'm bringing on the 2006 version. So unlike a recipe like 7542 or 8582, which they have a relatively long history of pressing, the Spring of Menghai was something that was created post-reform, and the reform happened in 2004. So I believe the 2005 version is the first time they made it. You can find a 2006, it's commonly cited. That's what we're going to be drinking here. And it's one of those teas that isn't subject to as much of the kind of dye speculation and things that will happen with a lot of their special productions. It will also happen with kind of their flagship products, so stuff like the 7542, for instance, which results in prices going up and down quite a bit sometimes, and not necessarily always being correlated directly with the quality of the teas. For instance, like if the price goes down by 80%, which has happened to some of these dye teas, does that mean that the tea is 80% worse than it was 2 years back? Not necessarily, of course. In fact, the tea is probably even better, the fact that it's gotten more age and whatnot. In the case of Spring Menghai, if you look up the prices of it on Danghe, it has fluctuated a little bit, but for the most part, the price has, just gone up 10%, 15%, and down 10 or 15%. So I picked this up for a relatively modest price. I think it was about $35, 400 grams. So you're talking sub 10 cent a gram or right around 10 cent a gram mark. So it's definitely not the fanciest dye product, and I think it's a good example of something that is very, very functional. One difference between me now versus 2022 is I've really focused the last couple of years on getting a lot of reps with factory tea. I like factory tea quite a bit, it turns out, and I am pretty okay drinking a lot of Menghai Tea Factory teas. I wouldn't necessarily say the Spring of Menghai is my favorite product. I tend to go a little bit more for kind of the flagship recipes. In this case, we're talking about 2005, 2006. Nonetheless, I don't think it's bad, and I do find significant appeal in it, and I think is an interesting contrast to those. So I feel like I know the factory better, I know the recipes a little bit better, basically, than 4 or 5 years ago. And this tea, I think you can find similar products, a lot of them that they market as kind of like spring or early spring. Those, in my opinion, can be quite similar. For instance, there's a 250-gram tool from 2005 that I think presents fairly similar. I think it's maybe a touch better than this tea. And there's another early spring cake that from 2005 that's a fair bit more expensive and presents also very similar. So it's one where I think they started to kind of experiment with different kind of recipes and things like that after the reform. Anyways, I am chatting a lot. Let's dig into the tea a little bit. Pick this one up from Taobao, Chen Tang over there. Good thickness already, smooth, has a bit of that, what I suspect used to be kind of the hay grass. Compared to a 7542 or an 8582, I feel like the basiness is not fully filled in compared to those teas, but it does have a lot of aromatics going on for sure. So yeah, when you are buying those teas, you are buying, I think, a little bit more of a track record of aging. I don't think this is aged bad or anything like that, but I do think this is probably never going to be an amazing aged tea. So one that, you buy it as you need to if you like to drink it. And I think, that's more or less what the intention was in creating this as well. 2006, a very specific time in kind of poor history and for Menghai Tea Factory as well. It's a couple years after the reform. A lot of people will cite, 2003 as kind of the last Dayi year worth buying. Others will cite 2004. Others cite 2005. 2006 is fallen just after that. So I think most people would acknowledge that the tea in 2006, on average, from Menghai Tea Factory is considerably better than 2007. A lot of this is due to a huge production ramp up just across the whole industry, and that certainly wouldn't exclude a big factory like Menghai Tea Factory. And so people were making a lot more tea, and as a result, the quality of the tea, on average at least, went down somewhat because you're having to fulfill just such a high quantity of tea. So this happens in a in a year where the quantity isn't totally maxed out, as it would become a couple of years later, but it would be significantly higher than a couple of years before. And I think that's a large reason why the quality of the tea starts to go down, is they're starting to tax their plants and things like that more, just to kind of milk as much quantity as they could out of it. Woody notes, really kind of an appealing aroma. The aftertaste too, it's leaving a nice, just kind of, a nice sweetness. I'd say maybe sugarcane-like in the back of my mouth. Little herbal too. That herbal note reminds me just a touch of 8582. It's good thickness to it too. Like you go in with, I think this is a tea to go in for very modest expectations. And for me at least, it absolutely exceeds them. I think this is just a very solid daily drinker if that's what you are kind of looking for. I have so much tea though that it's probably not one that I'm going to buy any more of, but it's one that I don't mind that I picked up a cake. It's one that I just kind of wanted to get to know the recipe a little bit more, sort of like the 7532. That's another similar boat for me. Just going to do one last steep here. I think this is one tea where it's cheap enough too, where I don't feel so bad if I just have like 4 or 5 steeps or even 3 and just call it there, because it's not one that necessarily demands to be brewed the whole way. Probably you could figure out the right ratios and stuff to mug this as well, if you are a mugger, which I am not. Yeah, and the aftertaste just slowly starting to coat my mouth. So it really is just kind of a proper pour in that sense. This one, I don't believe is sold by Quiche, but you can find samples. They're a bit more expensive than if you go straight to Taobao from King Tea Mall, a place like that. But definitely one that I recommend that Menghai Tea Factory fans check out. I think especially if you are shopping on a budget, it's hard to do too much better than this if you like the profile. Cheers. Yeah, and leaning a little bit more into that herbal, woodier tones coming into the tea as it's darkening up just a little bit. I've seen Marshall and speculate that this might have a lot of bada and kind of those grassy notes come from that. I find that explanation to be fairly plausible when it comes to this. Not an original thought by me. Yeah, and it just tastes like a proper pour, really. I think... yeah, it's just a little bit more on the aromatic side of Dayi. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in. There's plenty of punch in this too. The bitterness is picking up as well. So thank you all for tuning in. Let me know how you like Spring of Menghai if you tried it. Go ahead, seek it out on Taobao. Relatively inexpensive gamble for sure. If you can find it on Chen. If I forget to link it, remind me and I will put that link in there. I am bad at doing that, but I need to get better. So for a 20-year-old tea from the biggest factory and costing the amount that it does, not bad at all. So thank you all for tuning in. I will see you all next time. Cheers.